Good morning, Namaskar. Thank you everybody for joining the 23rd Insurance and Pension Summit of CII. This is a legacy summit that actually the first summit started even before the privatization happened in the insurance sector. This is a legacy that CII has been carrying on for this is the 23rd edition. It's a flagship platform for discussions on insurance sector in the country, and we are very happy today to present the opening session at early morning 9:30 on a Monday. Thank you so much for joining us, and do stay with us while the sun has just come up and it will set. But we would want you to stay with us a little after the sun has already set. That is, we would be carrying on the session till 7:30. We have very interesting sessions to cover. For the opening today, we have Tapan Singhel, who is the chair of the CII National Committee on Insurance and Pensions. R.M. Vishakha is the co-chair, and Krishnan is also the co-chair of the CII National Committee on Insurance and Pensions. And of course, we have Narendra from KPMG. He's a partner with KPMG, and I would request Vishakha to please start with the opening comments.
Thank you very much, Anuradha. I think thank you for introducing all the panelists, and a very warm welcome to all of you to the 23rd edition of the CII Insurance and Pension Summit. It is my absolute privilege to be giving the opening remarks and try and keep it as interesting as possible so that I hold your attention for the speakers who are about to come in next. I think, as we all know, insurance over the years has evolved as a process of safeguarding the interest of the people from loss and uncertainty. And it's contributed a lot to the general economic growth of the society, and it provides a lot of stability to the functioning of the process. It's also providing financial support in reducing uncertainties in business and human life. We're all aware of this. We say it at every CII Insurance Summit, but it's important for us to reiterate the contribution that insurance is making to the society. CII has been represented by a very strong representation through the committee. And even today, it's represented by all leading life insurance companies, general insurance companies, standalone health insurance companies, and insurance intermediaries. The very fact that the panel here that you've got comprises of the chair from a general insurance company, the co-chairs from life and health insurance companies is indicative of the inclusiveness of the entire Committee on Insurance and Pensions. We have been taking up a lot of regulatory issues with the authorities, with the regulator and the ministry, which has been appreciated. A few of the representations that we have made in the last few years. One, on the need for a relaunch of the PMAY scheme with an inbuilt credit-linked insurance and a mandatory life insurance for all the borrowers under the PMAY. The Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, as all of you are aware, is a scheme for the underprivileged, and not having insurance for them is leaving a liability behind for the family. So we believe that a holistic approach is really something that would work if the PMAY Yojana also had an inbuilt credit life. Especially now with the pandemic hitting lives and the livelihood of the Indian citizens hard, and with the increased mortality rate, the importance of protection to families becomes paramount as all sections of society struggle to meet medical costs and employment. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please.
Thank you. The need for a pandemic pool, I think this is another point that is being taken up very strongly with the regulators, and we see developments on that. In India, majority of the pandemic-related risks have been covered by the insurance companies as the metaphoric first port of call through life and health claims. I think there needs to be an applause for all the life and health companies for standing there and not throwing any fine print, not throwing any regulations back, and being there and taking the hit on their balance sheets for a pandemic-related incident, which is really something which has not been factored in when you do the pricing of the risks. Business interruptions due to lockdowns and resultant halted economic activity and choked supply chains, these could not be covered by insurance companies in most countries as the loss due to the point of state, I beg your pardon, has not been covered as a loss due to the peril of state-imposed lockdown was not something that was an explicit clause that was there in the standard insurance contracts. As an aggregate, the insurance companies have largely been able to withstand the pandemic-related losses till now. The sheer amount of capital required simultaneously across the world to absorb the loss of future variations of pandemics could be significantly more than the total capital available with the entire insurance and reinsurance market across the globe, reiterating the need for the pandemic pool that has already been represented before. And we have seen certain development on that also. Repricing of government schemes. I think the government insurance schemes are great initiatives. And I do believe that they have done a lot to raise the awareness of insurance across. However, I think it's imperative now that with the increased mortality, with the continuing loss ratios, which are going unabated for the past 6 years, there's enough experience to realize that it is not about selection of risk. It's not about target segment. It really is about pricing of the product. I think it's high time that the government recalibrate and make necessary revision of premiums in all the government schemes such that the industry at least breaks even in these portfolios. A lot of insurance companies are experiencing cumulative losses only because of the government schemes. And while the government schemes are fantastic, they have done so much to promote insurance awareness. We do believe that the time has come for them to be repriced also. And this is a sincere request that we make as part of my opening remarks. That's to sustain the schemes and the benefits, the sustainability of the providers of the scheme must be ensured too. The list of these important suggestions that have been made by the CII goes on and on. With the pandemic hitting the economy really hard, there are new risks emerging, and with that, there's a continuous need of innovative product framework to ensure that these risks are covered. Against that backdrop, CII has brought out the theme for this summit as Indian insurance sector riding the wave of change. Without using up any further time, I once again welcome all of you to the 23rd edition of the CII Insurance and Pension Summit. And with that, I would like to invite Mr. Tapan Singhel, Chairman of the committee, to share his views on the theme. Welcome, Tapan. We're looking forward to hearing you.
Thank you, Vishaka. Thank you for the lovely comments that you had. So, Vishaka, Krishnan, and the distinguished guests, members and friends of the media, ladies and gentlemen, a very, very good morning to all of you. And on behalf of CII, I extend a very warm welcome to one and all to the 23rd edition of the CII Insurance and Pension Summit. Now, as a physicist, one thing which was very intriguing to me from very early on was that if you look at boiling water, you put it on the stove, and all of us have done it, and you keep it on for a long time and don't see anything happening, and suddenly, steam starts coming out. I think, and we know this phenomenon is latent heat. If I look at our industry, for years together, the industry has doing a lot of activity on distillation, on innovation, on product differentiation, and it was like pumping in, and also getting a backlash saying that the insurance industry is lagging behind, and we would say, no, it's not so, it's not actually happening. And when COVID happened, it was that latent heat. I think all of a sudden, it all came to the fore. I think the regulators stepped in and they allowed digital policies to be sent. The insurance companies with all the innovations and product and the creation and the agility, they could really step in. So if you look back, in terms of the time that COVID was there and the way insurance companies could step in at that point of time and the way they could service the community in terms of be it health, be it life, be it general insurance, has been phenomenal. I think the NPS scores of the insurance industry moved up. The customers understood the importance of insurance industry, and that I think was something which reminded me of the latent heat and the conversion which happened at a very hyper speed. Now, when this wave of change is on, in terms of riding it, in terms of making the next big change from a customer perspective, from the country perspective, from a society perspective, from leading it from the front, and that is where CII has played a big role along the insurance industry and has representation of everybody, right? From insurtech, from health, from distribution, from brokers. I think the CII committee has represented everybody, and they all put together their heads in terms of what could be done very, very differently. And I remember, I want to make a special mention. I think Krishnan, my co-chair, was so enthused that he said we should cover 1 billion lives because that will make a difference. He came out with CII and BCG for 1 billion life coverage report. And I think there's an obsession that is there that the more Indians we can cover for health, life, at least we ensure that when something like this happens, we don't have people who are struggling actually to just get some protection. I think that spirit which was there, which I saw in the committee and the team and the CII and our partners, was something that was phenomenal. And I think this is why this theme is very important in terms of how do we write the change and how do we take the next level. Now, it's already known and mentioned that the insurance sector is the backbone of the nation in terms of how it really plays, be it for investments, be it support to the government or the government schemes, or the way it comes forward in terms of crises which is there now. Now, if I look at the COVID time, one of the most affected sectors has been insurance. Post March, April 2020, the world changed in more ways than one. The COVID-19 pandemic created unforeseen challenges for business across the globe, and the insurance industry was no exception. Even through the tough phase of the insurance industry, it got the sector reinvent itself like never before. The pandemic brought with it enormous opportunities in terms of operations, process, products, services, and claims, the most significant being technological advancements. Now, if I look at also in terms of digitalization and the way things were there, as I mentioned earlier, and if I look at number of claims which got settled completely paperless, if I look at the number of policies which got issued completely paperless, if I look at distribution also, a lot of people said that insurance distribution is very, very old-fashioned, still has paper, and the distributors still are very dependent on the physical means. I think there's a complete shift which happened, right from video calls to links being sent to renewals being done, being closure, which should happen automatically, or claims being settled from far away, video links being sent. I think it was a phenomenal shift which happened in these times, and the way when distributors came up to take up this role and ensure the customer is at the center and they could do their best to keep it there, and something which has been there. Now, it also taught us that the way we looked at insurance distribution, the way we looked at products earlier, has to have a radical shift. The world is changing completely. In fact, I was talking to Narendra before this went live. I was telling him the impact of COVID is not what we see right now. I think people are already talking the impact of COVID will be 10, 20 years also will be felt. In terms of social skills, in terms of how people interact with customers, in terms of how industries redefine themselves. So we should undermine it. The wave of change is definitely there. We should not think it's a blip and it's going to go away. And we have seen that it's a continuous process. We have this new variant coming in and the way people are looking, interacting with it. I think all this is very relevant that we have a topic like, how do you look at insurance industry riding the wave of change and moving to the next era completely and be prepared for the next 10, 20 years in a very, very different environment which is going to be there. Now, if I also look at in the terms of the risks which are coming through, be it the cyber risk or be it in terms of the transformation which the industry has to go, the legacy companies have, or the way the risk which comes through in terms of customer behavior changing, or the risk which comes through in terms of the distributors being looked into how they would be servicing it. All that is something which we shall be talking about, discussing, and seeing how things are moving to the next phase. But having said that, are we really up there for cybersecurity? I think people talk a lot about it. If I talk to insurance companies also, they are trying their best to see how they provide a big cover, but we're not sure in terms of what the effect will be in terms of multiplying effect. Now that's from industry perspective. At an individual perspective, are we ready for cybersecurity? We are also getting hacked. We're also getting to, are we prepared for that? Are we ready to look at big data? A lot of us talked about big data, and now there's so much data all across. But what do we do with data? Data lakes, data being put together, the cleansing of data. How do we look at it for the next phase which is happening? Or how do we look at online platforms now? Platforms is the thing now which is happening. How do insurance come and look at it? I already look at some of my distributors moving to a platform education in terms of putting the products on and ensuring that how the customer reaches out to that. As the industry, are we ready for it? So if I look at the industry now, a lot of things happen. The latent heat, the catalyst change, the complete transformation at a hyper speed. But for the next 5-10 years, this wave of change is there. We will ride it to ensure that from a customer perspective, from a nation perspective, from a society perspective, we make a huge difference. And this is the theme for the CII meeting this time. With these words, I welcome you all again to the 23rd CII Insurance Pension Summit. And I hope that all of you have an enriching experience. Anuradha and team have put together a great panel, great discussion going forward for all of you. And then I would like to invite Mr. Narendra Ganpule, Partner Digital and Management Consulting, KPMG, for the theme presentation. Over to you, Narendra.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tapan. I'm just going to share my screen. Please, someone can confirm if you are able to see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Yeah. All right. Very good. Thank you so much, Tapan. So very good morning to everyone, Honorable Chairperson of the CII Committee, the Honorable Co-Chairs, the CII officials, the assembled dignitaries, ladies and gentlemen. Keeping in sync with the theme of today's conference, which is about riding the wave of change, I'm honored to share some of my thoughts on the subject. And the wave of the change that I wish to talk about is not an ordinary one, right? What I call it, it's a tsunami, right? It's a very big wave. And to kind of just to put the things in context, right? I just thought we'll look at the businesses over the last 100 years or so. Now, if you cast your eye over the last few decades, you'll clearly see the evolution taking place in terms of business priorities, right? There was an industrial revolution over the last couple of centuries, which was further powered by, say, Japanese techniques of efficiency. Then as infrastructure, supply chain evolved, distribution became the key. And then in the 90s, which is in our living memory, we saw IT coming around to masses like us. And truly, what we call as an information age started. And you could see this reflecting in the management books also, right? Most of the management books written, you could see this particular drift happening. But what you are seeing over the last maybe 10, 20 odd years, which is really the age of the customer as such, right? And customer is more at the center. And I thought that it's very, very topical. And Tapan talked about it in his opening address to a certain extent in terms of how that is changing the way the businesses think about their operating model as such. Now, when we are looking at probably, say, executives, when we talk about, right, in business, we talk about executives having a very, very short attention span, right? You know what? The customers in the digital age have even shorter. I mean, we all know that, the customers are very, very, impulsive in their decision making. Something that we've seen, and data which was published recently, which said that significant amount of consumers today do research online and then decide what they want to buy, right? And it could be for anything, whether they are doing shopping for a wedding or buying right clothes for holidays or anything else, right? They research online, and then many of them buy online as well. When it comes to the insurance as a category, fortunately, those keywords are amongst the ones which have the highest conversion rate. Okay, and if you think about it slightly deeply, it's pretty logical. It's not difficult to understand, right? Because we may search something very casually, say something we see on the street, say a bike, right? Just because it's piqued our curiosity, we kind of search on that. But that doesn't happen with insurance as a category, right? So the person who's actually searching has already developed an intent for that particular category, and then that person goes about. Similarly, the content that you develop, right, in your digital assets, blogs, the vlogs, etc. And then there is a set of things which are purely around what you do on your social media, what your presence is like. And social media is not just having a Twitter handle or having an Insta handle per se, right? It's the mechanism actually to engage the customer and build on it beyond that, right? So how do you kind of do that? That's where the consumers, even people like us, are spending almost 6 to 7 hours. And this is not some number out of my head, but it was a research which said that people are spending 6 to 7 hours just on one or the other digital assets. This is not counting maybe the laptop that we use for working purposes, etc. Right? So keeping all of that in mind, it brings me to what many of us are familiar with, which is called Moore's law, right? And what you're seeing about the amount of data that we are generating, right? About 90% of data that we've generated, which is the data in stock, that has been generated in the last 2 years, right? So that's the quantum of footprint, digital footprint, all of us are creating, okay? Some of it willingly after taking consent of ours, some of it unknowingly and unwillingly as well, right? It happens through social media, it happens through e-com purchases, the way we kind of transact, so on and so forth, right? What is typically called as a big data, right? But it's absolutely at the micro level. Now, how do you harness that, right? That becomes a really crucial aspect, right? And this is gonna just explode. What we are seeing is not the end of it. We are on this particular journey, okay, and we are leaving more and more footprint as we go along in every walk of life as such, right? So when we kind of think about it, how do you as an insurers deal with this particular situation? And insurers are in a most privileged situation because they actually get the depth of data which probably hardly anybody can even think of, right? I mean, you talk about consumer products company, say a shoes company or maybe a luggage company, they don't, or a biscuit company, they don't have the kind of richness of data about an individual, about his financial standing, about one's maybe health standing, etc. The point is, what do you do with it? And we kind of thought about it across the three horizons, the way insurers can think about. The first and foremost is that the amount of footprint that you are leaving, okay, how do you kind of develop the personas around those footprint? That becomes very, very essential. And I will talk about it in detail on the next slide. But these are not just the personas developed from a superficial socioeconomic data or profiling that we do, but also every time a person logs onto your website, be it a customer or be it a prospect, right? How do you trace that person throughout? How do you create a party ID and do the entire persona development? How do you do the consent-based tracing, right? Where you take the consent of the person, okay, and do the thing. That becomes very, very essential. The other aspect becomes strategic partnerships, right? Today's world is not about, I going solo and winning in the market. It doesn't work that way, right? You have to kind of strike partnerships, okay? Some of those might be your competition in one sphere of life. Those could be the, your allies on some other sphere of life, right? There are some very, very unconventional partnerships which are being struck, right? Say insurer tying up maybe with a ride sharing company or a commerce company or something else, etc. So how do you kind of strike partnerships, right? And use all of that data, okay, to develop and enrich the persona. That becomes horizon number one. Horizon number two becomes is that how do you kind of design the products which are suited to today's reality? And again, Tapan touched upon it briefly in terms of what we did as a private industry, maybe in the last 15 to 20 years, or even before that, when the public sector companies were there as such, and what we are doing now is very, very different, right? There are opportunities to create, you call it a sachet products or a micro products or a bite-sized product. And how do you kind of embed products in all these partnerships, in all these ecosystems becomes very, very essential. Some of that might be a direct embedding. Some of it might be a very situational embedding that you customize it and you do that, and some might be the bundling. So having developed the customer persona, how do you kind of design the products which are suited to different personas and how do you embed that? That becomes a second opportunity or a second horizon. And the third and the last, but most important is that given the length of relationships insurance companies have with the customers, right? I mean, our relationships are decades long, right? It's not a 1 year, 2 year relationship. These are decades long relationships, okay? How do you think yourself as a platform, right? Every insurance company needs to start thinking itself like a platform, okay? That a person comes there, but there are so very many needs which are around that particular life of the person. And how do you kind of engage that person over the next 10, 20, 30 years? That becomes very, very essential, when you're thinking about your business strategies as such. Talking about the first horizon, where I talked about developing personas and developing, micro details. As you could see, the tip of the iceberg, right? These are all the icebergs, right? The triangles that you see. And the tip of the iceberg was what getting captured earlier, right? It was just about age, gender, address, possibly, or it was just about premium amount, so on and so forth. But now, voluntarily, people are sharing their travel details, their lifestyle patterns, right? They're all sharing that on social media. How do you kind of take consent, use that data, use that for product development? That becomes very, very essential. Where the e-com purchases are happening, which restaurants are they visiting? Earlier times, all that we were asking was probably where is your office address, where is your residential address as a part of the application form. But now we know how does the person travel actually from point A to point B, from home to residence, from home to office, what time of the day the person travels, right? Are there any products which are to be built around that? Does it travel by oneself, or is it chauffeur driven car, or is it by actually on a ride sharing cab, etc., etc.? So how do you kind of develop, use that data to create entire data repository? You call it data lake, or you call it by some other nomenclature, but harnessing all that data becomes essential. Second part, which is the second horizon, is embedding the product over the years. I mean, this is the typical life cycle of the consumer that we are all familiar with. And we always used to kind of start placing the products once the person is in the later years of the college, starting employment, and going all the way, right? And our approach as an insurers traditionally has been very prescriptive in the sense of, okay, fine, you had started a new job. Okay, term probably is the right time for you to buy, or a savings product is what you started with, or you getting married, which means you have a dependence now, or if you have a childbirth, your dependence increases. How do you think about it? And there's nothing wrong with that, right? That's been the level of data at which we were capturing it. But now with the H1, which is the Horizon 1 that I just spoke about, the depth of data that you have, the opportunities for you to bundle the products, to embed the products is so very many, right? So when somebody starts his job, the opportunity is not the only opportunity is when he starts the job to sell the product. But for the job, that person is traveling back and forth 300 days a year. So every opportunity that he travels, daily commute, becomes an insurance opportunity, right? So suddenly there is a explosion of number of opportunities that one gets to interact with the customer, to sell the product, think about bite-sized product, think about micro products, and embed that. So one needs to kind of think it very, very differently in that sense. I mean, I'll give you my personal example when it comes to say travel. For I think some airline, I won't mention it, but they did a good job of seeing that I end up coming to their website normally around February or so to kind of plan for my summer holidays. Okay, they saw that pattern that I'm searching for, some destination, travel destination in Europe or US or somewhere else in the world. They actually started customizing and started sending me teasers starting from January itself, right? So they have the information, and this I'm telling you, it happened about 4 or 5 years back. Every related to travel is pre-pandemic in any case, but it started almost 5 years back. So people or businesses around the world are making use of this deeper data, and you don't do it manually. You have to have engines, you have to have computers, you have to have a data lake to power that. But that's very, very essential. Insurers sit on truckloads of data. Third and the last is the third horizon, which is thinking about the platform which can set up a virtuous cycle. Now, this is a flywheel that all of us are familiar with, but that's so very important. You start with, say, customer experience. It's very, very essential. All of us have parameters like CSAT or Net Promoter Score, NPS, something to capture that. But the king today is customer experience. I mean, the example often that I give is, say, something like a Google Pay, right? Google Pay has no license, right? I mean, it doesn't have a regulatory license. The entire Google Pay is built purely around CX, right? And once you have the CX as an insurer, right, how do you kind of build the value-added services on top of that, which will drive more partners? Partners will drive selection. A selection will obviously lead to better customer experience, and that will set off a virtuous cycle of growth, which will in turn lead to deeper insights, which will allow you to create hyper-personalized products as such, which in turn supporting improving the customer experience. So I think it's very important kind of to think about it. And if you take, say, health as an ecosystem, just as an example, you have so very many ways to actually build this as a platform. And similarly for a life, or similarly for retirals, or similarly on any other aspect of a business like motor also. So these three horizons are very, very important, so to say. Coming to the last slide, in terms, just to summarize in terms of key imperatives, I think it's a slightly verbose slide, so I'm not going to walk you through each of these, but it's very, very important for you to think about data as a source of competitive advantage, build ahead of times, ahead of the curve. Okay, cloud computing is, truly having, entire data in cloud is an essential thing. It's not a luxury anymore, or it's not too good to have. It's a must have today, right? So it's very, very important for businesses, for regulators to think about these imperatives and work on it on these particular aspects. So with that, I kind of conclude my opening remarks and hand the time back to the co-panelist. Thank you very much.
Anuradha, would you like to just move on to the next session, given that we are already at 10 a.m.?
Yes, Krishna. So just quick concluding remarks from your side, also to participants. Next 1 minute, and then we just take you to the next section.
Sure. I'll keep it very quick. So let me take this opportunity to thank Tapan, Vishaka, and Anuradha, and the CII team, and Narendra for some very thoughtful comments, and CII for pulling this event together. Just a one-line summary of some of the key takeaways I heard from Vishaka, Tapan, and Narendra. So what struck me about what Vishaka said, which I think is a very, very important theme for us to carry forward, is is the fact that the industry has stood by and paid claims. Indeed, 20,000 crores worth of health insurance claims and perhaps in excess of 13,000 crore worth of term insurance claims. From Tapan, the fact that we as an industry have become innovative, and again, echoing the theme that we are now perhaps an essential service. And 2 points there, I want to take up from the CII recommendations. One is the fact that for an essential service, specifically if I looked at health or other lines, 18% GST is quite penalizing from a customer standpoint. So what can we do to make insurance more affordable? And the second, given that COVID, is a pandemic, what can we do to regulate healthcare services with the objective of making it affordable, if necessary, only as far as the pandemic is concerned, and perhaps not generally so. From Narendra, I think the key theme that I took about was personalization. We do live in the age of data and platforms. So how do we look forward as an insurance industry, leveraging the power of data to become more personalized and offer better experience? And lastly, to again what Tapan said, the CII BCG report lays out a bold vision to have 1 billion Indians covered in the health insurance. I think that is a worthwhile ambition for all of us collectively to pursue as a country. So thank you again, and back to you, Anuradha.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. We'll be starting the next session shortly at 10:10. Request the chairs and co-chairs of the committee to please join that session. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.